Rabbi Michael Ber Weissmandl, a childhood Talmudic and mathematical prodigy in Czechoslovakia prior to World War II, survived the Holocaust and after the war emigrated to the United States. Weissmandl, while still a young man, had stumbled onto the notes of the 13th century Rabbi Bakya, suggesting that divine information could be derived from the Torah by means of skipping a specific interval of letters. Now, with all the horror behind him, Weissmandl returned to the fascination of his youth, the possibility of a mysterious Bible code.
Rabbi Weissmandl, through his diligence and determination in his studies of the Torah, made some remarkable discoveries. The word Torah in Hebrew consists of 4 letters, a tau, a vav, a resh, and a he, which are equivalent for us to talk about it as if it was a T, an O, an R, and an H. We should note here that the Hebrew alphabet consists of 22 letters that are essentially consonants. Vowels are generally simply inferred. The vav operates sort of what we would consider as an O, but is not considered a vowel. In the book of Genesis, if you go to the first equivalent of a T and count 49 letters, and then take the next one, in other words, the 50th letter, is the equivalent of what we would consider a vav. It's what we would consider an O. You count another 50 letters, it's a resh, or like our R. You count another 50 letters, and you come to a he, or like an H. In other words, it's as if you found a T-O-R-H at 49 letter intervals. It spells the word Torah. Rather remarkable in its own right, but one of those things you could dismiss as just a happenstance. But when you get to Exodus, you discover the same thing happens. You come to a T, 49 letters plus 1, you get to the O, the R, and the H the same way. And so again, this starts to look very designed. In fact, it's rather interesting that this number 50 are the number of days from the Exodus to the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai. In pursuing this further, you go to the book of Leviticus, the 3rd book, and nothing like this happens. But you go to the 4th book of the Torah, the book of Numbers, the same thing happens, but only if you spell Torah backwards. Kind of weird. You go to the book of Deuteronomy, again you find the equivalent thing, but only if you spell it backwards. Now, you wonder, what does this mean? And you stand back from it all. It's as if those 4 books are pointing to the middle book, 2 forward, 2 back, to the book of Leviticus. So you examine Leviticus more carefully, and you discover not 49 letter intervals, but 7 letter intervals. Every 8th letter, you have the word Yahweh, or the name of God. And you stand back from this whole thing, and you realize the Torah is always pointing to the name of God. Rabbi Weissmandl's discovery is the first modern hint of hidden codes in the Bible, and of course has led to using computer to find others. Professor Daniel Michelson at UCLA has estimated that the probability of Weissmandl's discovery happening by accident is less than 1 in 3 million.
This discovery also has great significance to the ancient menorah lampstand, still used in Jewish practices today.
Like the lamps in Israel's ancient lampstand, the Hebrew word for law was encoded at 50-letter intervals in the opening paragraphs of Genesis and Exodus. The Eastern lamps point toward the servant lamp, the lamp of God, which was elevated above the others. Leviticus reveals that servant lamp design with Yahweh, the Hebrew word for Jehovah, encoded at 8-letter intervals in its opening verse. In the ancient menorah, the western lamps were reversed to point toward the servant lamp. Following that design, the word Torah was found to be encoded backwards in the introductory paragraphs of Numbers and Deuteronomy. Just as the lamps on either side of Israel's ancient menorah were ignited from the flame of the elevated lamp of God, these 4 encoded Torahs point to the glory of Yahweh, or Jehovah, in Leviticus.
It was the 50-year-old discovery of Rabbi Weissmandl that finally convinced a small group of Israeli scientists that computers might be the key that would unlock the centuries-old mystery of the Bible code. It was Dr. Eliyahu Rips, one of the world's leading mathematical experts, who devised the first mathematical model to test the viability of the skip codes Weissmandl had apparently demonstrated. But he soon enlisted the help of Doran Whitsom, a graduate student in physics specializing in general relativity, and Yoav Rosenberg, a brilliant young computer scientist. Together, they hoped to prove scientifically whether or not a Bible code existed. It would be a long and tedious undertaking.
Dr. Rips, in creating the Bible code computer program, took the original Hebrew text of the first 5 books of the Bible, the words that, according to the Bible itself, God dictated to Moses on Mount Sinai 3,200 years ago. And all he did to that text was to eliminate the breaks between the words, so that instead of words on a page, it became one long strand of letters, 304,805 Hebrew characters, from the first letter in Genesis to the last letter in Deuteronomy, with no break in words. So perhaps Dr. Rips was restoring the Bible, the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, to its original form. In any event, he was not changing the order of the letters. He was just eliminating the breaks between the words. He then programmed a computer to look for really a very simple code that would reveal new information. Skip any equal number of letters, and the new information was revealed.
Perhaps we should take a moment here and explain exactly what an equidistant letter sequence, or ELS code, is and how it's constructed. To detect an ELS code, a computer must first be programmed to write down the first letter of the encoded word, represented in our formula by N. The computer will then skip a fixed number of letters, represented here by the character D. Write that letter, skip the same number of letters, and write that letter, and so on. Let's try a simple example. Rips explained that each code is a case of adding every 4th or 12th or 50th letter to form a word. Skip X spaces and another X spaces, and the hidden message is spelled out. This appears to be nothing more than a simple description of ELS coding. But if you begin with the first letter of the paragraph, R, then skip every 3 letters and pick up the 4th letter following, the coded message is revealed. What is infinitely more difficult is the creation of a surface text that is sensible and easily understood, and yet will seamlessly accommodate specific letters at fixed intervals. That process is called encryption.
There are several things that have to be understood about the entire equidistant letter sequence coding. Just looking for words, virtually any words, as an equidistant letter sequence, you will find them in the book of Genesis, you will find them in War and Peace, you will find them in virtually any sufficiently long text that you try to find them in, particularly if you're using a computer. In any case, what is found is generally random. You have to apply statistical analysis to determine whether or not what you found is in fact random, or is in fact well beyond what you'd expect to find at random.
The key to statistical significance is how many related terms are found in a small area of biblical text and how many characters are in each term. Short words in lots of text are very likely just coincidence. So if all text can produce words at equidistant letter sequences, what makes the Torah codes unique?
Now, it's amazing. And only in the Bible do you find this. When, for instance, by skipping an equal number of letters, you spell out President Kennedy, the very next letters in the same skip sequence say to die, and Dallas is encoded in the same place. When you look for Shakespeare, the very next words in the same equal distance skip sequence say, will present plays on stage, and Hamlet and Macbeth are encoded in the same place. You could find Kennedy or Shakespeare in some equal distance skip in any big enough text. If not in War and Peace, look in a bigger book. Eventually you will find some equal distance skip sequence that does spell out the name of any historical figure. But only in the Bible will you find encoded consistently in the same place accurate related information.
In order to test the ELS code theory, the research team created a program according to strict scientific and statistical rules. The usable text would be only the book of Genesis, some 78,000 letters. In order to make certain the results could not be tainted by subjective interpretation, they selected the names of 34 of Israel's most famous and revered sages as the target of their search. To make it more difficult, they also asked the program to search for either the target's birth date or death date. After months of work, the incredibly complex mathematical model and program was ready. Now it was up to the computer. The results of this test startled even the researchers. All 34 names were there, coded into the text, along with either their date of birth or date of death.
He used statistics correctly, and he found that the information encoded in the Bible was encoded there against odds of 10 million to 1. He looked for the same information in War and Peace and 2 original Hebrew texts, and there found nothing but random letter combinations. Only in the Bible did he find consistent, coherent information against odds of 10 million to 1.